This is the High-Stakes Lowdown, a RotoViz podcast brought to you by the Fantasy Football Players Championship. I'm Eric Balkman from the High-Stakes Fantasy Football Hour and the FFPC. You can follow me on Twitter at Eric Balkman and the FFPC on Twitter at FFPC. Before we get into the show, I want to remind everyone that you can get a listeners-only 10% discount to RotoViz by using the code RVRadio2022. That's RVRADIO2022. Your subscription gives you unlimited access to all of the RotoViz content and tools, and it supports the podcast channel. Now, without further ado, here's the latest edition of the RotoViz High-Stakes Lowdown. Hi, hello, and welcome in to Tuesday, January 7th, 2025. This is the RotoViz High-Stakes Lowdown, and I am your host, Eric Balkman, at Eric Balkman on X. You know me from the Fantasy Football Players Championship, myffpc.com. Of course, the High-Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network and the High-Stakes Fantasy Football Hour. So good to have you aboard tonight as the regular season is behind us. However, the postseason will be here before you know it. And if you want to participate in a great contest or a couple of great contests, we'll be discussing both of them here tonight on the show. If you want to know what we're talking about and how to get involved, it's called the world famous FFPC Playoff Challenge. You can register for it at myffpc.com, myffpc.com. That is available right now. You can win up to $500,000 with a $200 entry fee. A $35 entry fee gets you eligible for a $100,000 grand prize, something tonight's guest knows a lot about. We'll get to that in a second. Basically, it is a 12-person lineup that you set at the start of the playoffs. Quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 receivers, a tight end, kicker, defense, and 4 flexes. You can only pick 1 player per NFL team. So there's no salary cap. There's no draft. You just make your lineup however you want to do it. You're obviously going to be picking a player from 12 of the 14 playoff teams this year. Once that lineup is locked in, so is your team for the rest of the playoffs. You will get double points for any players that make it as far as the big game. And I mean the Super Bowl. I think I can say that. Maybe I can't. The NFL is probably listening to this right now, and I'll get a cease and desist letter tomorrow. But double points for anybody playing in the Super Bowl. It is fun. It is very quick to put your lineups together. myffpc.com. Your fantasy season isn't over. Register now and make this next month a really fun and potentially financially profitable one as well. That's at myffpc.com. Tonight, and I'll welcome in our guest right now, a guy who won basically altogether in the FFPC last year, $250,000, more than $250,000. And he is here tonight to talk about how he took down the 2023-2024 FFPC Playoff Challenge to win that $100,000 grand prize. You already follow him, or you should be following him, on the X at Kullin23. That's Kullin23. Coming live from the epicenter of high-stakes fantasy football, Appleton, Wisconsin, it is Kullin Hoffman. Kullin, welcome. Good evening.
Good evening, Balky. Good to see you. Thanks for having me again.
Absolutely. A pleasure to have you aboard. I don't know if you caught the high-stakes fantasy football hour on Friday, but we had Mike Melberg on, who won the $1 million in the FFPC Main Event from Appleton, Wisconsin. Now tonight, we have you from Appleton, Wisconsin, and I'm doing the show live at my home in Appleton, Wisconsin. I've heard it's the water. I've heard it's the cheese curds. I don't know what it is, but man, the funnel of money coming all over this country is going right into Appleton right now. It's been pretty crazy, man. And you've been a big part of it.
Unbelievable. Yeah. Congrats to Mike too. I did watch a little bit of that and was surprised that another big winner came from the great state and the great city of Appleton, Wisconsin. It's awesome.
Which is fantastic. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I know you won the $100K last year in the $35 level. Didn't you also take second in that contest as well?
First and second. Yep.
First
and I
and
also
second.
took second in the 200 as well.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, second place. So runner-up in both contests, and you win this one. It was a banner season for you. And then runner-up in the Best Ball Tournament for the FFPC last year as well?
Sixth.
Sixth. Okay, sixth.
Yeah.
Unbelievable year. And you said I think you said you bought a house or put a down payment on a house with all the money, right?
Yeah, I sold my old house and then we upgraded a little bit. Yeah.
The house that fantasy football built. I love to hear it. Coming up on tonight's show, Kullin and I are going to go through everything you need to know. Well, maybe not everything you need to know because we only got like 45 minutes or an hour, but we'll definitely sink our teeth into a lot of the questions that are going around for anybody formulating a playoff challenge lineup tonight. We won't be formulating a lineup this evening. However, if you want to see me do that, I will be doing it with my co-host on Thursday night's High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. I'll tell you more about that at the end of the show. But we will talk about the conundrum that is Jalen Hurts and the concussion protocol, which Ram you're going to go with, what teams you should be fading, what teams you should be targeting as a potential Super Bowl appearer this year in both the AFC and the NFC. So the first thing I want to ask you is when you sit down to formulate your lineups, are you mapping out how you think the playoffs are going to go? Are you making educated guesses about how many games a certain player is going to play? When you sit down and really attack this, Kullin, what's the first thing that you do?
Yeah, I do. I just look at the bracket and I map out what I think who's going to win and what the Super Bowl matchups and just go from there. And then I kind of have an idea already, but I jot down who I would play from each team along the way, and gives me an idea on who from each team that you would want to play. So, yeah.
And then you're sort of just kind of mixing and matching, because I know you're obviously going to submit multiple entries, but you're just kind of mixing and matching and trying to get the best combo of players at that point, right?
Correct. Within each scenario that you make.
Right.
So, yeah, I do multiple brackets where I obviously change the scenarios and base the players based off of that. But yeah, I do the bracket style and then list the players, and I'm going to do multiple lineups. But yeah.
You are a veteran of this competition. You've won this competition. There's a lot of people who have been playing in it for years. There's some people that have never played in it before that will be jumping in for the first time this year. What do you think the biggest misconception is? And we can frame this two different ways. The biggest misconception that veterans have who have played in this contest before, and then maybe something that beginners or people who've never played in it before think about the contest and until they play it and they're like, oh, I was wrong about that.
I would say for the beginners, you don't need to be perfect. You don't need to, like last year, the way I set it up, I had Cleveland beating Houston, which obviously didn't happen. I had Houston's defense. But they ended up scoring 2 touchdowns along the way or something. But you don't need to be perfect in when you are setting up your bracket. If you get it wrong, it's okay. And also, you don't need to have multiple. You don't need to max the contest. There's going to be people that have 150 lineups in it. There was last year. I think there was one person that was profitable out of it. So you don't need to have 150 lineups or 100 lineups. You can do well with 10, 5. You just need to get on the right players, and you need to find the chalk which is the most popular plays, and find plays off of that make sense.
I was actually on Fantasy Alarm earlier this evening, and I was talking to Coop and Jim Bowden about this, and I said, looking back on a lot of these lineups over the years, I feel like the majority is chalk, right? It is very chalky, the team that wins. It's usually about 3 players, 2 or 3 players every year that seems to make the difference. Players that are not chalk. Like I think about Devonta Smith last year was a perfect example of one. Is that the kind of the way that you build it, where you're like, okay, I'll go right here. This guy's going to be super owned. This guy's going to have a high ownership. This guy won't, so I'll pepper him in here. And it's like maybe 2 or 3, just a couple of peppers in the gumbo usually get it done.
Right. You don't need to go wild with everything. You don't need to pivot off every single chalky piece. A lot of, like last year, the biggest piece for me was Aaron Jones. A lot of people were fading Green Bay. So when they won and he had a good game and he got another game, that just catapults you, because most people are either fade him or soft fade him, which would mean they're playing the defense or kicker. So when you get that one right, it just you're that much further ahead of that many people that faded them. So it's just finding those little one-offs that you see most people doing that, you can take advantage of. You don't have to do too many. You don't have to go crazy. Otherwise, you're just going to pivot off the good plays too.
Winning on the margins, just like season-long fantasy football. That's basically what it is. Let's go to YouTube. A couple of comments already. Tom Smith is chiming in. I'm thinking the Rams win over the Vikings. Toughest game for me is Washington versus Tampa Bay, fading Denver and Green Bay. Mm-hmm. I'm fading Denver and Green Bay as well. The Rams, I could see beating the Vikings, and I think the Washington-Tampa, from an entertainment aspect, I'm going to love it. For trying to figure out something for this contest, it's got to be maddening for people trying to figure out who's going to win that game. Let's attack this piecemeal. Rams over Vikings. Are you splitting kind of like your lineups or your rosters that you're submitting, Kullin? Are you kind of submitting a few that with you projecting the Rams winning, with you projecting the Vikings winning, or doesn't it make a difference between those two teams because of how good the players are on those rosters?
I think both teams can make a run, so I want to have pieces from both. I see the benefit of taking a stand and going with whoever you think is going to win the game. If you think the Rams are going to win the game, maybe play, I think it's Ryland, the kicker for the Vikings, or the defense maybe. But I'm not playing. I think I'm going to have Jefferson and Nakua probably in every single one of my lineups. Either team that wins, I can see going a run. So I want to have a piece of that offense for sure from either side.
Yeah, worst case scenario, you're guaranteed 2 games from one of those guys and maybe more. We'll see what happens there. Is the toughest game for you also the Commanders and Buccaneers to figure out? I should bring up the point spreads for these. But when you're handicapping that game and looking at it, who do you think comes out? Or is it kind of a coin flip type game?
It's definitely a coin flip for me.
Buccaneers.
That's a tough one.
I just looked it up.
Right. Yeah, and that's pretty much a coin flip because they're at home. So
yeah,
it's a tough game. And the Washington is interesting because there's not Jaden Daniels is a superstar. You're not really, most people aren't playing Jaden Daniels. So it comes down to who you can play. Terry McLaurin, Zach Ertz. Those are the only 2 options for me. So yeah, I could see Washington as a smart fade and just hoping Tampa wins, but right now I'm playing both sides of the game, either Ertz or McLaurin, and then I'm having pretty much all of Bucky right now, but I'm going to have some Emmett too as well. Yep.
So why?
Yeah.
So I was thinking about this. It's same. You could say the same thing about Mayfield as you do Daniels. I don't think a lot of people are going to roster either one of those quarterbacks, en masse. But with Tampa, you also have Mike Evans there. But and obviously Rashad White or whatever is there to eat into Bucky Irving. But for you, it's all about Irving. Why is that?
I just think he's a superstar. He's just different. They started feeding him the ball down the stretch when they needed him, and he came through. And then there's the Jalen McMillan factor, who's a budding superstar as well, who's taken some receptions away from Evans. It's not an easy fade for sure. I'm going to have some Evans as well, but I actually think Jalen McMillan's a sneaky, really, really low on pick, but I'm not sure if I can get there.
Who's a better? I'm trying to think of the best way to. Who's the better sleeper? I would say in this competition this year, Rashad Bateman or Jalen McMillan.
I would like to know the status on Zay Flowers, but
I would too. I know
right
that
now
he did. Here's what I do know. He did not practice today. I don't know what his status is going to be the rest of the week. But when you consider that, I'll let you. Let's just say lineups locked today, which they don't. But if they did, would you have more Bateman than McMillan?
Yeah, I think that they can make a Super Bowl run more than Tampa Bay can.
The other thing too that Tom brings up, he's fading the Broncos and the Packers. They're the 7 seeds. I think they are fairly easy to fade. I was talking about this today with one of my local cohorts on the radio, and I was saying that you can't run on Philly. It's very, very difficult to run on Philly, which kind of cuts Josh Jacobs off at the knees. And then when you don't have the man-to-man guy that breaks man-to-man defense in Christian Watson, We saw what happened when they didn't have him against Minnesota. Minnesota loaded up on man-to-man defense, and Jordan Love said after the game, none of these guys were winning. Dobbs wasn't winning his one-on-ones. Wicks wasn't none of these guys. So to me, I look at that game and I'm like, how does Green Bay score points if they can't pass it and they can't run it? To me, the Packers are a real easy fade here. So that's what I say about Green Bay. And then the Bills, obviously 8.5-point favorites at home against Denver, a young Denver team that I feel like is still a year away. I happen to agree with Tom. I'm fading those two teams as well. If I was playing in this competition, which I don't because I'm an employee of the FFPC, but if I was, those would be the two teams I would be fading as well.
I'm soft fading Green Bay and I'm fading Denver, which is actually a little scary. I don't know. Denver they scare me a little bit. They can be frisky.
And so you could see a path where they actually upset Buffalo in the first round.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yep.
Okay.
I don't think it's very likely, but they're live to win. They're not. Yep. Team winning.
Yeah. Okay. And this is the other thing too that Corey Walters brings up on YouTube. Quarterbacks with Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes. It's really, really difficult to figure out who the quote unquote correct quarterback is. Like you said, you don't have to be perfect, but when you're forming these lineups, Kullin, do you normally start with the quarterback and figure that out first? Or is that not necessarily a priority for you? You might start a team with a running back, start a team with a wide receiver, and fill in the quarterback later. How do you normally handle that position, especially this year?
Yeah, I normally start with the quarterback and go from there. This year, I'm only playing two quarterbacks, and it's Josh Allen and Lamar. And especially if you're only playing one lineup, to me, you want to fill out a bracket. You want to determine who's going to win between Buffalo and the Ravens and pick that quarterback. Most likely they're going to be in the optimal.
So Allen and Jackson is who you're going with for your quarterbacks this year. If they don't make it to the Super Bowl, I'm assuming that Kelsey is in your back pocket, or do you have something else up your sleeve for the Chiefs?
Yes, I like Kelsey, but I do like Worthy as well.
Worthy, okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Is he's your favorite receiver in this competition for the Chiefs, as it were? So if you're not going Kelsey, you're probably going to have a decent amount of Worthy.
Yep, it's tough to pick Hollywood or Nuke, but yeah, I like Worthy, his explosiveness. They started getting him more involved later in the season. But Kelsey's a tough fade just because the tight end position is kind of weak this year. So it's just such an easy click for Kelsey, and he's been so reliable year in and year out. It's just going to be tough for people to not click him.
So the whole Worthy over Brown and Hopkins conversation, is it because of the explosive play ability that Worthy has that seemingly Brown and Hopkins don't have anymore? Is that what separates them? I mean, I know head coaches and offensive coordinators talk all the time about the importance of explosive plays. Maybe we need to look at that in this competition as well, is the guys that not necessarily a ceiling guy, but players that have the ability to break the big one. Xavier Worthy, Saquon Barkley would be two of them that come to mind right away. Obviously, Jahmyr Gibbs is another guy that comes to mind. But Xavier Worthy is a guy that I guess, part of the cachet with him is everybody's going to be on Kelsey. There's probably going to be some Pacheco teams as well. And here's Xavier Worthy that's kind of laying in the weeds. So I get it with that. Speaking of Gibbs, let's talk about the Lions. David Montgomery, according to Dan Campbell, he expects to have David Montgomery back next week from his IR stint. Part of the reason that a lot of people won championships this year or lost them is because they either had or were going against Jahmyr Gibbs when he basically had the backfield to himself. I know Craig Reynolds was there, but David Montgomery brings a totally different element, and he changes things for Gibbs when he's in there. Do we simply fade Gibbs at that point because Montgomery is going to cannibalize him, and then because the Lions have so many other options? I mean, you could go with Laporta, you could go with Goff, actually, you could go with Amon-Ra St. Brown. How do you feel about Gibbs? And somebody asked this in the YouTube chat, and I'm sorry I didn't give you credit on this, but how do we handle Gibbs in this competition, knowing that the Lions, as of right now, expect Montgomery back for that first game?
Yeah, it scares me because Dan Campbell loves Montgomery. So if he's healthy, they're going to go back to what they were doing in the regular season, I believe. I wouldn't. Gibbs has been so good. I would just keep feeding him the ball. But yeah, it complicates things. I was super on Gibbs after that news. I've kind of switched. I was going to play some Laporta lineups as leverage off Kelsey anyway. So I was kind of bummed to see that because his ownership might go up just a tad bit, but I switched some of those Gibbs lineups to Amon-Ra just off that news. It's just, you don't know who's going to get the goal line touches. That's so important. And Amon-Ra is just so consistent that you know what you're getting out of him.
I think that tight end, well, we'll talk about tight ends in a little bit. Corey Walters has this, and I don't think it's going to be the same for every single one of your lineups, obviously. But maybe for somebody who is only submitting one lineup into this, Kullin, who should their defense be? Who's your top defense choice? And why would that be the case for this season?
Mine is Houston. I think that's going to be a lower scoring game.
Second year in a row, right? This is you're chasing the magic from last year. Get that text.
Just how it works out, I guess. And they could totally win again. They could totally beat. They're at home. They could definitely beat the Chargers. They're so injured. They're trending the wrong way. The Chargers, I think, are just a better team. But I don't think it's going to be a super high scoring game. So you want your defense, you want them ideally, it didn't happen last year, but you ideally want them to lose that first game. So you need to find a team that you think is going to lose in the first round and is not going to give up a ton of points. So it comes down to Denver's a decent choice, but they're playing high-powered Bills. So they're pretty much out for me. Green Bay, they're playing a high-powered Philadelphia team, so they're out for me. And then it comes down to Houston or what's the other defense? Flipping it. The Chargers. If you think that Houston's going to win, you flip it. You play Nico and then flip the Charger and play the Chargers defense.
Washington and Tampa are out of the question, right? Because of the 50-point total on that game.
Yeah, there's one defense that it's blanking me that is a possibility that I'm.
Well, you mentioned the Chargers attack. I mean, would the Steelers defense be in play against Baltimore?
Yes, the Steelers. Yep, the Steelers. But they're playing Baltimore. Then it could be the Baltimore could put up 40, or that could be a close game. They already played like an 18-13 game and lost, I think, to Pittsburgh. So it's definitely a possibility. But yeah, Pittsburgh is another possibility because they don't have many options on offense that people are excited to play.
The Pittsburgh-Baltimore game, 43.5 is the total, fairly low in that game. And Pittsburgh has historically played Baltimore pretty tough, including this year too. So I think that's something that's definitely in play there. Let's talk about Jalen Hurts here. Now, technically he is still in the concussion protocol. However, Philadelphia released Ian Book today, which was like their emergency quarterback, third or fourth string quarterback or whatever, which makes it seem like Hurts is going to be practicing the rest of the week and he'll be in there against the Packers on Sunday afternoon. Now, even if that is the case, this is a guy who, when he takes the field on Sunday, will not have played in 3 weeks. How much does that scare you, knowing that timing is everything with the Philadelphia offense with Brown and Smith? How much does that make you nervous about potentially not rostering Hurts necessarily, but having A.J. Brown as your Eagle, having Devonta Smith as your Eagle, and also understanding that Saquon Barkley is going to be owned quite a bit in this competition as well, Kullin?
Right. Yeah, it worries me a little bit that he hasn't played well. He does get to play a somewhat banged-up Packers secondary, so makes me feel, and he's at home. And then Saquon killed the Packers in week 1. They can lean on him the first game, I feel like, a little bit. Work the way back in, but it doesn't scare me to play the pass catchers. If it was maybe a hand injury or some foot injury where it reduces his mobility, he might run a little less trying to not take any hits, but you can still slide and avoid it that way. So I wouldn't be too worried on the pass catchers. And A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith are great leverage off of Saquon, who's going to probably be the highest owned, if not one or two, I would say.
Yeah, there's this narrative circulating. Maybe I think it's local and national, saying now especially locally, how the Packers did such a good job against Barkley in week 1. And I'm like, I don't remember Barkley being slowed down. And I just looked it up now. 24 carries, 109 yards. He gets into the end zone twice. He also catches 2 balls for 23 yards and gets a third touchdown. I mean, they did not do a good job against him. And I'll tell you, they didn't really do a good job against anybody. You had Dallas Goedert 4 for 31. Okay, I guess that was all right. But Devonta Smith 7 for 84. A.J. Brown 5 for 119 and a touchdown. Remember, he torched Jair Alexander in the first half. And then Jalen Hurts 278 yards and 2 touchdowns. I mean, Philadelphia was great against Green Bay in week 1. So, I mean, any of those guys I think are fine. And here's the thing. If you play Brown or Smith in that game and Barkley, because the Packers do have a pretty good rush. I mean, I think the run defense for Green Bay has gotten better as the season has gone on. I think they're like top 7, top 8 DVOA right now, or that's what they finished at for the regular season. So if you roster Brown or Smith and Barkley doesn't go off and the Eagles win, I think you're feeling all right, because the probably reason that Philadelphia moves on, it's because of Brown, because of Smith, and then we're not worried about the concussion with Jalen Hurts anymore. So there's a lot of different ways that Philly can win that game. Moving on to Minnesota, a team that came somewhat close to the number 1 seed. Now they're the 5, and they're going to go to Los Angeles. A lot of Vikings options. I mean, we have Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, Aaron Jones, TJ Hawkinson. It's Sam Darnold, too, I think would be in play as well. 3 straight games on the road is probably what it's going to take for the Vikings to get to the Super Bowl. If you're not, I don't want to say soft fading them, but if you're not really focusing on the Vikings, who should you target on this team? You said earlier it's Justin Jefferson for you. Are there any other players that you would look at potentially doing a pivot from Jefferson on Minnesota that you think could be worthwhile?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was kind of excited to play Aaron Jones before the Week 18 game, but it looks like he's playing through some sort of injury of some sort. So Cam Akers came in for a little bit, scored a touchdown, so that worries me a little bit, so I'm kind of off of him. But you could definitely play Jordan Addison. I think in a must-win game, I think Jefferson had 3 receptions against the Lions, so he's definitely fadeable. It's just, if you're having one lineup, do you feel comfortable fading him? I wouldn't. I'm playing multiple lineups, and I'm probably still only playing Jefferson, but Addison's definitely playable. In Hawkinson, a little bit. If you are fading Kelsey, you could possibly play Hawkinson if you think that Minnesota's going to win.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I think that the other thing to keep in mind with Jones is, for whatever reason, the Vikings have this love affair with Cam Akers, where they have acquired him now in back-to-back years, and they're using him. And even, like, I know Jones was still battling something towards the end of the game. We don't know what it was. I know he took a nasty hit in the first. It was at the first half or the second half. But I don't know if it was because the Vikings are like, this game's out of hand, we're not going to be able to win it, let's just put Cam Akers in there. Or they honestly think that the secret to, I mean, what did we see in all those years in Green Bay for Jones? The Packers always seem to give him no more than 2/3 of the touches in most games, not all, in most games. And maybe Minnesota's starting to realize, look, if we want to keep this guy healthy so he can make plays for us, not only in the fourth quarter of this first game, but down the road, like, we got to make sure that he's on the field, and Cam Akers is a nice way to do that. So that would concern me as well. Whereas you don't have that concern with, Saquon Barkley or Derrick Henry or anything like that.
Kevin O'Connell did make a comment after the game that he aggravated something he's been playing through, but he'll be fine. So
all right,
that worries me a little bit. Yeah,
so that's the thing. He's coming in a little dinged up, and he's got Akers to deal with, and he plays on a team that has Jefferson, Addison, and Hawkinson. So I mean, there's that as well. Let's talk about their opponent in week 1 here. Not St. Louis, the Los Angeles Rams. Puka Nacua, Kyron Williams, those are the 2 most popular ones. Before we talk about how you feel about those 2 guys, Cooper Kupp, what's his role in this competition going to be? We have seen him just destroy teams with a ton of targets, a ton of catches from Matthew Stafford. He's a veteran guy who can get open, make the tough catch, and he will pile up the yardage. Yet we have seen the exact opposite of that for the remaining, the last month of the season. does that make it seem to you like maybe I should have Kupp on a few of these teams because I know what he's capable of, and because his stats have been depressed for the month of December, this is a nice opportunity to get some variance going in my favor, and I could see Kupp working out? Or is he just a total hard fade?
I've definitely thought about it for sure. He's, I think he's definitely a sharp pivot. I haven't got there yet. I don't know if I will. I don't know if something's wrong with him or if he lost a step, but his involvement is not. It's either Puka or Kyren. I mean, if you look at their targets throughout the last 4 or 5 weeks, it's Puka's in the double digits and Cooper's getting 5, 6. So I mean, he can definitely go off and have a good game and be the guy that you need for sure. He's got the talent to do that. I don't think I'm going to do that. I don't even think I'm going to get to Kyren, who's going to be fairly popular. I think I'm just Puka or nothing. The Vikings they got torched last week against Gibbs, but throughout the season, they've been one of the best rush defenses against the run. So Kyren scares me a little bit. So, and they've been terrible against the pass. So I think Puka's the only option for me.
Corey Walters chiming in. If I told you the Rams are going to lose, who would your pick be for Los Angeles? It's still Nakua, win or lose, right?
Oh, yes, but you could definitely, depending on what game script you're thinking about, you could definitely think about playing the kicker or defense.
Yeah, that's true.
If I knew that going in.
If you knew that going in. There's going to be some lineups where people are going to. I mean, think about this. They're hosting a 14-win team, and aren't the Vikings favored in that game? I believe they are. I'm looking it up right now. I'm sure they are. Hold on. Why is it not?
A lot of people.
1.5. Vikings are favored by Vikings favored by 1.5. Go ahead, Kullin. I'm sorry.
I'm just saying a lot of people saw last week and have, because I had them possible going to the Super Bowl and then they got blown up by the Lions, and I think a lot of people lost faith in the Vikings after last week. But I still think they're capable of going on a Super Bowl run for sure. It's a lot harder going on the road for 3 games, but they definitely have the talent to do it.
If they were to win this game, they probably would play Detroit, assuming the Commanders and the Packers lose. It's as I always say, it's a weekly thing in the NFL. Like, as bad as you look one week, you can look really, really good the following week as well. So that's the Vikings, that's the Rams. Let's get back to this tight end conversation. You look at the best tight ends in fantasy football this year. Brock Bowers at the top of the list. Trey McBride is right up there as well. Neither one of those guys are in the playoffs, Kullin. You are looking at tight ends like TJ Hawkinson, Cade Otton if he's healthy, which we don't know, Zach Ertz, who is definitely several tiers below McBride and Bowers. You have Dallas Goedert, who is definitely a tier below, Tucker Kraft, who's probably on that same tier, Dalton Kincaid, who should be up there, but he's not. You do have Mark Andrews. Pat Freiermuth has been coming on as well. But that's about it. So when you consider, and then Laporta, obviously I should bring up, would you be okay with a chalky Travis Kelce as your tight end for a healthy amount of your lineups, knowing that this is not the greatest playoff postseason for tight ends because the guys who are most successful at the position are not in the postseason this year?
Correct. Yeah, I'm definitely okay with it. He's by far the easiest tight end click. And the Chiefs, like I said, they don't have a super appealing option besides him. I don't think people are excited to play Worthy or Pacheco. So, yeah, I think Kelce, I'm definitely okay with it. I will be playing a lot of Kelce, but I will also have lineups without Kelce and be playing Laporta or maybe Andrews as well.
So that was my next question. I think that you could make the case that the 2 most loaded offenses in each conference are Detroit and Baltimore. Which of those tight ends do you think you would be more likely to roster given all the other options? Would it be Laporta or would it be Mark Andrews?
Oh, Laporta. Laporta's been trending upward. He's getting a lot more targets in the last 4 or 5 weeks. A lot more heavily involved in the offense. They play indoors as well, and they are going to be playing at home until they lose. So pretty easy Laporta for me.
Tight end premium format. I believe last year you had on your championship roster, you had 2 tight ends in Kelsey and Njoku, right? Corey is saying too, defense kicker. I think that's obvious. A lot of people will just put their soft fades there. Is tight end bad enough this postseason that they would be a soft fade where you're just only going to have 1 tight end and that's it, even though it's a premium format?
Yeah, I'll have maybe 1 line. I think one of my lineups has 2, but other than that, they all will have just the 1.
Okay. Let's talk about the Bills here for a second. I know you said Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen will be your 2 most popular quarterbacks this year. For the teams that you have Josh Allen on, do you automatically choose Derrick Henry as your Raven, or would there be some Andrews? And I know Zay Flowers is a little tricky right now. We talked about Bateman as well. Justin Tucker, the Ravens defense. What do you do with those Josh Allen teams with your Ravens?
Yeah, I'm playing mostly Derrick Henry, but I will have some Mark Andrews teams. I kind of want to play Rashad Bateman a little bit, as crazy as it sounds, but don't know if I'll be able to get there. But yeah, I don't see myself doing the Justin Tucker thing again this year, and hoping he outscores anybody from Baltimore that you need. So it's pretty much Derrick Henry or a few. I will have a couple Mark Andrews teams, I believe, or 1 or 2.
I didn't realize this. I'm just looking at Bateman's stats this year. Dude had 45 catches, 756 yards, and 9 touchdowns. I did not realize he had 9 touchdowns. He had games this year of, 6 for 54. He had a 3 for 80 game. And then granted it was week 18, whatever, but the Ravens are playing to win it. 5 catches, 76 yards, and a touchdown. Now, some of that was with Flowers hurt. Right. But if Flowers is hurt, or if he, can't go this week, I don't know. The Bateman thing is really, really interesting to me, especially at the $35 level where you're going against a lot more teams. I think Bateman makes for an exciting pick.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely a $35 play for sure. And I don't think Flowers is going to play this week. I really don't. They say day to day, but I just don't see him playing this week.
And then if the Ravens, what if the Ravens lose? That's the other thing too. What if okay, let me throw this at you.
They've lost to Pittsburgh already.
Right. So let me throw this at you. And again, this is like we're getting into the chaotic portion of the show. But what happens if Pittsburgh beats Baltimore? They get up early. Maybe there's some sort of defensive or special teams, weirdness or whatever. And I don't want to say Derrick Henry's taken out of the game, but he's muted a bit. He's a little bit neutered because Lamar Jackson is throwing. What happens if Flowers doesn't play and Bateman has like a 5 for 76 and a touchdown game, and then that's it, and the Steelers move on? Bateman could end up being he's
going to be the guy you need. Yeah.
Oh, unbelievable. Yeah. I mean, we could tell ourselves a story and we chuckle about it, but we can stare down that path and see how that could happen.
No, but that's a good example. You need to do that while building these lineups, because in that case, you're going to want somebody from Pittsburgh. You're going to want to have George Pickens to benefit from, beating Baltimore in the first game. So you're not going to want to fade Pittsburgh. So you got to think through those scenarios in your head when you're building these lineups. And it's kind of fun to do that. It gets you in trouble though, tinkering where you're sitting at work and you're thinking about, oh, that's a good idea. Maybe I should.
And that's the thing. It's like, it's fine to do like a variety of those, but what you don't want to do is pile like 6 or 7 of them on the same lineup, because then it's just it's wrought with disaster if you do that.
Right. They call them the chalk picks for a reason, because they are good picks.
The Chargers. Let's get back to that Chargers-Texans game. I think we can go with, depending upon what you think, and I think you're thinking Houston loses that game. But in the situation where maybe the Chargers lose, you could go with Dicker. You could go with potentially the Chargers defense, who's been one of the more underrated defenses all season. And then you have a rookie named Ladd McConkey, who's been one of the best receivers this year. And then J.K. Dobbins, who is fresh off of IR. He's back and he's running people over. He's looking good. How do you attack this Chargers team just from a game theory standpoint here?
Yeah, Dobbins is looking good again. I have a soft spot because I drafted him in one of my high stakes, and he did well until he got injured, which was sad.
Yeah.
But
by the way, I should give you congratulations because I saw you did take down a FantasyPros Championship league this year as well. So the success keeps going.
Yes, me and my brother co-managed that one, so shout out to him. Yeah, it was fun. Can't wait. We got a main event ticket, so we got a
nice
one of our main events back, so that's nice. But what was the question? Now I got sidetracked.
Well, when you talk about the Chargers, you're talking about how Dobbins was good until he wasn't, but then he was good again.
Yes, he was very good. But for me, it's Ladd or I'm playing either Dicker or their defense. J.K. Dobbins is just they also mix in some other guys. I just don't feel comfortable playing them against. And the Texans have a good defense. Ladd's just, I think, is such an alpha and it's a 1 point per reception format, so he gets a lot of receptions and targets. And Quentin Johnson, though, last week, 14 targets, could go off the wall and go him in the 35. I wouldn't mind that as well.
So it wasn't an aberration that we saw with Quentin Johnston last week.
No, I think he's heavily involved in the offense for sure. He could definitely do that again. If they're trying to take Ladd away, they don't mind throwing QJ the ball, but I don't know if I can pull that trigger in the 200.
Well, Quentin Johnston and Rashad Bateman sounding like very similar plays, right? I mean,
absolutely high leverage plays.
High leverage plays. If the Chargers get eliminated right away, then all of a sudden you're looking that potentially Johnston was the guy to hold.
And he has a big touchdown catch, and they lose absolutely, right. And they could definitely lose. You could definitely see the Texans beating them. They're at home. They haven't been playing the best, but they could beat the Chargers. The Chargers aren't world beaters.
2.5 point favorites are the Chargers right now in Houston. Total on that game is 42.5. That will be the first game in the playoffs. Starts at 4:30 Eastern. So make sure you have your lineups in by then. Kullin, what's the way that when you submit a lineup, how much do you mess around with that during the week? Do you mess around with it all the way up till game time, or do you simply just add another team? Like because when you have multiple teams, I feel like you want to have them structured in a way that there's a path where, what happens in the actual games and who moves on. You want to have that path as one of your rosters, right? But if you tinker with one, then maybe that's more of a duplicate of another, and then you got to tinker with that one, it's a vicious cycle, right? So once you have these teams, how do you handle kind of modifying them throughout the week?
Yeah, so history will tell you that I start tinkering, and then I find another option that I like so much that I just add another entry.
Right, yeah.
And that just kind of keeps going until I feel comfortable with the combinations that I have. If eventually it'll run out with combinations that you like, unless you like infinite. I mean, there are infinite. You can just keep going and going and going if you really want.
You will max out on entries before you run out.
You run out of combinations. Right. Absolutely. Whether you like them or not is one thing, but
right.
But yeah, that's kind of how I've been doing it the last few years. Is I go with my gut right away. I tinker because there's news that I believe was it last year or 2 years ago there was a snowstorm that delayed a game until Tuesday. I think that I tinkered because I was scared of the snow. There's certain scenarios that you can tinker all the way up until lock that either makes you add a lineup or just change things. But yeah, I'll definitely be tinkering and watching news. Just like the Montgomery news already came out, so that kind of got me off Gibbs a little bit, but I still have some. But yeah, definitely be tinkering.
And you'll be following the Zay Flowers situation as well as the week 100%. Goes on. That's another big one. We're still awaiting Jalen Hurts it may be a foregone conclusion.
He's going to play. Yeah.
He's going to play. You are right. Last year, the Bills-Steelers playoff game was moved to Monday because there was a potentially dangerous snowstorm that hit Buffalo. So it was moved from Sunday to Monday. Now, this is another thing, and Corey Walters brings this up as well. any weather issues that are affecting your picks, whether the teams are playing in a dome, whether they're playing outside. Is there anything as it stands right now, Kullin, that has you wondering, okay, is weather going to be a factor in who I pick in this game?
I've been keeping an eye on it. I haven't seen anything that's crazy. I think there's some snow expected in Buffalo, 1 to 3 inches as of yesterday. But nothing that's getting me off of anybody. I mean, if you want to target a kicker that's indoors, one of the kickers that's indoors, I wouldn't mind it. But no reason to weather affecting any of the games as I see right now. That definitely could change as we get closer to game time.
Fairbairn is kicking indoors. So is Cameron Dicker in the first round. And then I think all the other games are outside. Tampa's outside. Philly's outside. Buffalo's
LA,
outside.
That's kind of indoors.
Oh, that's the other one. You're right. The Rams is indoors. Yeah. So that's Joshua Carty and Will Reichard. And Will Reichard too. I mean, that'd be interesting. Like if that dude kicks like 3 or 4 field goals,
he has been too.
That's the thing. And if the Vikings lose like 23-19 with an extra point and 4 field goals from Reichard, boom!
You're gonna need him. Yeah.
We've told another story where
exactly.
This is what makes it so fun and so maddening. Some would say it's more maddening than fun. Some would say it's more fun than maddening. Some people have more fun when it's more maddening than fun, as sick as that sounds, but that's how it is. That's what's great about this playoff challenge. Kullin, final question here for you tonight. A non-chalky player, and I'll go with my Friday night co-host Farrell Elliott's approach to this. A non-chalky player that we have not yet talked about. So Bateman, Quentin Johnston, they're out. You got to come up with somebody else. So we'll do that. That players should really look seriously long and hard about rostering, as well as a guy that you think a lot of people will have on their roster that you are down on, that you probably won't have on as many rosters, that the public is higher on than you are. Who would those 2 players be?
We briefly touched on. I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about Xavier Worthy, but Xavier fine. Worthy definitely would be my choice, just because he's an amazing pivot off of Travis Kelce, who's going to be.
We talked about the explosive playmaking ability that Worthy.
Well, just not just that. I like that. If you would have told me that in week 1, though, he had the same ability. They've just gotten more heavily involved in the offense now. He's just getting more reception, so that's. Not only does he have explosiveness, but he has a role in the offense now, which I really like. And Kelce, they're mixing in Noah Gray and all these other guys that. But yeah, Xavier Worthy is definitely the guy that I would be playing. That's going to be low owned. Or Sam Laporta, we touched on him as well, but he's not going to be owned at all. That is really, really good leverage off of. You could play with Kelce too, who's going to be high owned with a low owned Laporta, which would be a nice little combo there. And then I think
briefly before we move on, obviously Worthy did not play this past week because the starters all sat.
Yeah,
but Worthy has seen 31 targets in the 3 games before that. He hit 46, 65, and 79 receiving yards in those 3 games. Scored 2 touchdowns in those games as well. And 21 catches in his last 3 games. So there is something there. And oh, by the way, 50 yards rushing combined in those last 3 games as well, getting into the end zone 1 time there. So yeah, I'm with you on Xavier Worthy. This is not week 1 Xavier Worthy. This is a guy that is a real serious difference maker right now, for sure. Okay, moving on.
Yeah, I think, and it pains me a little bit to say it, I think Josh Jacobs is going to be a little too highly owned. I don't think many people are going to want to fade the Packers because they do have a chance to win. The public has been high on them for a while now. As a Packer fan, I don't get it because they haven't beat a good team all season long. Every time they faced a good team, they've gotten advantage to them. Yeah. Yes. On top of that, Philadelphia has a really good rush defense. I think they're going to be playing from behind. He doesn't catch the ball, all that, and they mix in Wilson and Brooks, but I still think he'll be owned and overly owned.
I think another part of that is because for the reason we've talked about the Packers receivers all season. Like, you can't trust any of them.
There is right.
And I know
even with Watson going down. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Right. And I know he's hurt, but still, like, is it Reed? I mean, that guy's disappeared for multiple games.
But
is
he
it
might
Wick?
be played. Yeah, because he had a good game against him week 1.
Right. And then Dobbs is probably the most targeted one, but again, not an exciting guy. He doesn't have that many. I mean, he's capable of it, but he doesn't have that many explosive plays. Tucker Kraft too. I mean, what you see is what you get with him. I don't think he's going to be lighting the world on fire. Jordan Love, I don't think anybody wants to utilize their quarterback spot on him, especially the stats that he's been putting up lately.
And so then banged up his elbow as well.
And he's got a banged up elbow. So what does that lead us back to? Josh Jacobs. So if you're going to have a Packer, most people are going to have Josh Jacobs. I'm with you. I see this as like a 65, 70-yard game with 1 touchdown, and then the Packers are out. And then that's, you know what I mean? That doesn't do it for me.
Right.
Permar99 brings this up too with a player that I don't know if this was his player that is going to be not rostered a lot because of Josh Allen, or a player that that should be that is going to be rostered that shouldn't be, because I think James Cook really is the only other bill I'm excited about outside of Josh Allen. I should ask you the same question I did before. If you're talking about these Lamar Jackson teams, is it James Cook and nobody else, or would you have some Shakir? Would you take a chance on Kincaid?
Mixing in James Cook and Shakir on my Lamar teams.
Okay. All right. Makes sense. Perfect. Okay. I think we covered a lot of ground here tonight. One of the things I know, there's plenty of stuff that we did not talk about, and we just don't have the time for it. But what's great is there's been a ton of coverage on this already this week. Sean Siegel and Colin Kelly have been hard at it at Fantasy Football Overtime with RotoViz. You had the Fantasy Football Report guys at RotoViz dedicate 2 hours to this, and even they said they just scraped the surface. I'll have plenty more coverage on this the rest of the week as we lead up to the wild card kickoff on Saturday. But the great thing that we got accomplished tonight was talking to the guy who climbed to the mountaintop last year. Not only to the mountaintop, he was in second place as well. First and second place in the 2023-2024 FFPC Playoff Challenge to win the $100,000 and the second place prize as well. Kullin Hoffman at Kullin23 on the X, Kullin 23. The joining the pride of Appleton, Wisconsin here. You and Mike.
The epicenter of
the epicenter of high stakes fantasy football right now. You're the co-president. You and Mike are co-presidents of it right now, which has been fantastic. Thank you so much. Congrats on all your success. I wish you nothing but the best of luck going forward, Kullin. And thanks so much for hanging out with me tonight and sharing your insight into this competition.
Appreciate it, Paul. Thanks for having me. Good seeing you again.
Absolutely. You too, man. Be good. We'll talk soon.
Good luck, everyone. Yep.
That is Kullin Hoffman, ladies and gentlemen. He won the $100,000 as well as the second place prize last year in the world famous FFPC Playoff Challenge, the $35 level. And you can do that too when you register at myffpc.com. myffpc.com is where to go for that. There's no draft. There's no salary cap. You're just choosing the 12 players that you want on your roster: quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 receivers, tight end, kicker, defense, and 4 flexes. You don't have to modify your team throughout the playoffs. You are just watching them go throughout. Once you lock it by kickoff on Saturday, that's your team. And hopefully can win either a $100,000 grand prize or a $500,000 grand prize. It's going to be a fun format. We already are close to half full on both competitions. So time is of the essence. Go register at myffpc.com right now and build your teams today. They only take a few minutes to put together. These lineups get put together fast, lightning fast, and you can grab multiples if you want as well. That will complete tonight's show. Now, what's going on the rest of the week? Thursday night, the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network will air from 7 until 9. Pleased to welcome back onto the show legendary upside Steph Miller. You read her waiver column all season with LU, and she and I are going to attack this competition again on Thursday night. We'll probably build a couple of lineups for you that night as well that you can dupe, or you can modify them and submit your modifications, whatever you want to do. But we will be talking about a lot of this stuff going on Thursday. That's from 7 to 9. And then Friday, we will touch on it. We will go through it. We will have a lot of content on this. However, I will be pleased to be welcoming in our second consecutive $1 million winner onto the show. In fact, he was just on the HSFF Hour about a month and a half ago. Pete Tarzowitz, who won the FFPC main event this year and the $1 million that goes with it. He's going to be coming back onto the show this Friday night at 10 p.m. Eastern with myself and Farrell Elliott. And that will be your show. That will be your week of FFPC shows for this week. Now, this show, the RotoViz High-Stakes Lowdown, we will have our season finale next Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern. After next week, we will no longer be weekly. We will go monthly, and we'll do a new show on the first Tuesday of every month up until September when I get back from Las Vegas and the FFPC live events. Then we'll go back to weekly. So that's your schedule. Remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, comment on the video, share it with your friends, share it with your enemies, and get notified each and every time we go live right here on this channel. For Kullin Hoffman, I am Eric Balkman. This has been the RotoViz High-Stakes Lowdown. Go register for the FFPC Playoff Challenge right now and make this fantasy football season keep going. Thank you for listening to the High Stakes Lowdown, a RotoViz podcast brought to you by the Fantasy Football Players Championship. And thanks to Grapes for our theme music. Please review the podcast on iTunes under the RotoViz radio feed. It helps us find new listeners. Contact us via email, rotovizradio@gmail.com. We'd love to hear what you think, and follow us on Twitter at RotoVizRadio. And remember, you can always support the show by subscribing to RotoViz at a 10% discount through the NFL podcast homepage, rotoviz.com/podcast.